Okay, example 3, we're just going to do a few more practice problems with function notation because it can be kind of awkward and unfamiliar when you first start dealing with it. So I want you to consider the function f of x equals 3x minus 7. That basically just means this is the function we're going to use for this problem. And we're going to evaluate some information based on f of x. Okay, so this first problem asks us to find f of 3. Okay, all that means is to find the value of our function f whenever we input 3 for x. Okay, so to figure that out, all we're going to do is we're going to input 3 for wherever we see x, and then figure out what that equals. Okay, so this would be 9 minus 7, so f of 3 would equal 2. Okay. B here asks us to find f of negative 2, and just for the sake of reminder, remember our function is f of x equals 3x minus 7. To find f of negative 2, again, all we have to do is replace this x with negative 2. So we're evaluating this function when the input negative 2 is put in for x, and we're trying to figure out what the output is. Okay, so f of negative 2 would be 3 times negative 2, that just replaces x, then minus 7. So this would be negative 6 minus 7, that's just 3 times negative 2. And therefore f of negative 2 would equal negative 13. And I just want to note here that in the last two examples, all we've really done is generated two points that would lie on this line if we were graphing it. Right? The first point we generated was when we put in 3 for x, put it in red, when we put in 3 for x, we got 2 for y, or for f of x. And when we put in negative 2 for x, we got negative 13 for f of x. So those would just be 2 points that we could graph if we were trying to turn this into a graph. Alright, let's look at these other two questions here. First off with C. What is x when f of x equals negative 4? Well, what is this asking you to do? In the function f of x equals 3x minus 7, what are you being asked to find? Well, essentially what it's doing, or what the question is asking you to do, is asking you what number could I put in for x as an input to get negative 4 for an output. To figure that out, all we have to do is equate or replace f of x with negative 4 and find out at which x value does that occur. So now this is just some simple algebra. We bring the negative 7 over, and when we change sides, we change signs, so that becomes negative 4 plus 7 equals 3x. Negative 4 plus 7 is just 3. And then divide both sides by 3. X equals 1. So this means that when I put in 1 for x here, I get an output of negative 4. Alright? Same thing down here. What number could I put in for x to give me an output, or the function evaluated at that x, of 14? So in f of x equals 3x minus 7, I'm going to replace f of x with 14 and then solve for x. So I bring the 7 over, change sides, change signs. This is 14 plus 7 equals 3x. 14 plus 7 is 21. Then divide both sides by 3. X equals 7. Okay? So again, when I input 7 for this x here, I should get 14 as an output. We're going to look at another function This is kind of a special type of function called a constant function. Consider the function h of x equals negative 8. And we're going to be asked to find h of 5, and then we're going to find h of 0. Okay, so this is a very unique function. It's called a constant function, in that when I try to evaluate h of 5, usually, at least on the last few examples that we did when we were finding f of something, or in this case h of something, we just replaced the variable with whatever value was inside those brackets. But can you see why that's difficult to do here? Where are we going to put that 5? There is no x to put that 5 in place of. So this is a special type of function in that regardless of what input you put into the function, you will always get the output negative 8. So if I put in 5 into my function, I would get negative 8. If I put in 0 into my function, I would still get negative 8. If I put in 1, I would get negative 8. If I put in 97, I would get negative 8, and the pattern would just continue. Graphically, just to show you really quickly what this looks like, this is just a horizontal line at y equals negative 8. So if I input, say, like 1 for x, the function would just drop me down to here, to the red line for negative 8 for y. If I put in negative 5, then I drop down to negative 8. 10, drop down to negative 8. 6, drop down to negative 8. Doesn't matter what you put in for x, you will always get negative 8 for y, or for h of x. Alright?